Still to come, Russians protest against being called up to fight in Ukraine. An officer is shot in a recruitment centre and the Kremlin admits it's made mistakes. Heavy fighting is continuing in Ukraine's Donbas region, which Russian forces have been trying to take for months, but where Ukrainian troops have been making gains in recent weeks. Getting full control of Donbas remains President Putin's stated aim in Ukraine. Our senior international correspondent Orla Guerin and camera journalist Gökçe Koraltan report from the city of Bakhmut, where residents endure constant Russian shelling and the destruction of their homes. I should warn you, her report contains some distressing images.
Inside a city under relentless attack. This is Bakhmut, pounded by Russian airstrikes and shelling. Ukrainian forces still hold the city, but the Russians are at the eastern edge. It's hard for us, says Ludmila, one of the few venturing out. Have you thought about leaving? I don't want to. This is my homeland, she says. I wish you well, she adds. Others are desperate to go, but facing a dangerous wait. Irina flinches at this all too familiar sound. Her 14-year-old daughter, Yelizaveta, is the main reason she wants to get away from her birthplace, which is now a battleground. As we wait with them, we lose count of the shells. What a memory for a teenager to take away from home. It's easy to see and to hear what people need to get away from. In the last few minutes, we've been hearing incoming and outgoing shells every 30 seconds or so. It really doesn't stop. This city is in the center of a fierce fight now between Russian forces and Ukrainian forces. Everything is okay, Irina says, trying to reassure Yelizaveta. It's very hard to go, she tells me. It's only because of the war. The main thing is to save my daughter's life and to take our cat and kittens so that we all survive. Rushing in to get them out, Sergei Ivanov, a volunteer with a van and a tattoo that says "Seize the Day." He's been doing just that for months, evacuating frontline areas.
I feel happy when I see smiles on these faces and I heard thanks. It's perfect. It's why I'm here. It's like I'm main mission, like my life for these people.
And you are risking your life every day.
I think it's usual for me and usual for any Ukrainian people, any Ukrainians.
Loading up the essentials, Yelizaveta has the pet carrier and Irina grabs the final bags. They're beginning a journey to the relative safety of the capital, Kyiv. Nearby, we come across a victim of the morning's shelling called Andriy. There's no let-up. For over an hour, his body can't be moved. The living keep walking. His sister, in red, can only take cover. Andriy spent his life saving others. He worked as an ambulance driver. As Russia tries to take this city, it appears ready to destroy it, a pattern we have read in the ruins before. Shell, kill, repeat. The Russian army way. Orla Guerin, BBC News, Bakhmut.
Russia's attempts to call up another 300,000 soldiers to fight in the war against Ukraine are being met with widespread protests and even the shooting of an army recruitment officer. Reports have circulated on social media of people with no military experience being drafted, along with others who are too old or are disabled. Our Russia editor Steve Rosenberg reports.
At a military draft office near Moscow, the roll call begins. More Russians mobilised and on their way to fight in Ukraine. And left behind their loved ones. For many here, this war has suddenly become very real. But at this recruitment centre, the Russians we spoke to said they supported the draft. I'm in the mood to fight, says Dmitry, an HR manager. Since we've been drafted, we have to serve. This mother says the lads will run about a bit there. They'll lose a bit of weight. It'll be fine. Not everyone is so positive. In Siberia, a recruitment officer was shot and seriously wounded. The gunman reportedly incensed that his friend had been called up to fight. Across Russia, there's been a spate of attacks on enlistment officers. More than a dozen have been set on fire since Vladimir Putin announced the call-up. And this is the Russian Republic of Dagestan. Protests against mobilisation. A sign of the anger in Russia's poorer regions, populated by ethnic minority groups, where many feel they are being called up at a disproportionate rate. When the Kremlin says, your country needs you, some Russians are happy to answer President Putin's call. But clearly, many are not. And in some parts of the country, mobilisation is sparking social unrest and undermining trust in the authorities. Look at the queues leaving Russia. This is the land border with Georgia. Many Russian men of military age are trying to get out. But for their sons and husbands, a very different journey starts here. Destination, Ukraine and the Kremlin's war. Steve Rosenberg, BBC News, Moscow.
ITV News has witnessed long queues of Russians fleeing into neighbouring Georgia as people try to escape being drafted to fight against Ukraine. Georgia, a former Soviet republic, is on Russia's southern border, but relations between the two countries are strained. Russians can enter the country without a visa, and huge numbers are now seeking sanctuary, with long lines of cars and people desperate to escape. Our correspondent Rupert Evelyn is at the Russia-Georgia border tonight. Rupert.
Well, you can't tell it because it's dark, but this is a remote mountainous region that is currently attracting the attention of tens of thousands of young Russian men. They're aiming here because this is one of the few ways out of Russia. The queues, we believe, stretch back into that country up to 20 miles. There are people walking here, bicycling, and of course cars and lorry. A lot of people are trying to get out of Russia tonight. They have been for 6 days since Vladimir Putin announced that he would mobilise his reserves. Time may be of the essence, and that may put more pressure on this checkpoint.
Leaving their homeland behind them, fleeing a war they do not want to fight. Thousands of predominantly young Russian men are crossing the border into Georgia, looking for peace, capturing the moment, not knowing when they'll return home. This place, high in the Caucasus Mountains, has become a focal point for those fearing conscription into Putin's army. A drone gives a glimpse of those queuing their way out of their country. Inside Russia, the wait to escape can take days. There's a heavy price to pay for leaving. You may have left Russia for a long time.
I don't know when I can come back. Maybe never. And I lost my home and the culture that I belong.
Fearing Kremlin reprisals for fleeing, some we spoke to didn't want to be identified.
Я оставил семью, ребенка, жену.
I left my family, child, wife. It's really hard for me. I can't even imagine what I'm to do now. If they recognise me as a deserter, then I cannot return there. I'm ready to start my life again. Heavy Russian armour amongst those leaving today has fuelled anxiety that officials may halt the exodus soon.
For many Russians crossing into Georgia, it gives them a freedom, both from Putin's war, but also a freedom to express an opinion about it.
But just because there's opposition here, it's not representative of public opinion inside Russia.
К сожалению, в России многие годы действовала пропаганда, которая...
Unfortunately, in Russia, propaganda is in place. There is panic, but it's not amongst everyone. How long will Russia allow those they want to mobilise to leave? Rumours suggest that there may only be a few days left to avoid forced fighting in Ukraine. Rupert Evelyn, ITV News, Georgia.